Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and apologies for sneaking in at the last minute there, but the Victoria line failed to ferry me here in an adequate fashion. I think it was inadequate, but anyway, I got here, so it's lovely to see you all again. So what I wanted to do this morning was to have a conversation about how well services are meeting the needs of people living with dementia, explain how we work out whether that's the case, and also to think about it's not just the individual services, it's how the system wraps around people who are living with dementia, their carers and their families, and what do we think is happening there as well. So that's what I'm going to cover in the 15 minutes that I've got, and hopefully still leave time for questions. Rob reminded me that this is the third time that I have spoken at this conference, so I imagine there's an awful lot of you in the audience who have already seen my mum and know exactly what it is that I'm going to talk about here. But for the uninitiated, this is just to explain how CQC goes about finding out how well services are actually delivering the care that they are there to deliver. And we ask 5 key questions of every service. That could be a service that's out in the community, it could be a service that's in a care home or in a nursing home. It's also a service in hospitals. We ask exactly the same questions of hospitals as we do of adult social care services. And the 5 key questions came from conversations that we had with people who were using services to find out what mattered to them. And what they wanted to know was that the service was safe, that they could take risks, as Jeremy quite rightly said. We don't expect people to be wrapped up in cotton wool. We do expect people to be able to take risks, but in a safe and supportive way. They wanted to know that the service did what it said on the tin, that it was effective in what it was there to provide, that people were treated with dignity and respect, and that there were caring staff who supported them appropriately, particularly at those difficult stages like end-of-life care. And something that I think is really very important for us when we're looking at services for people with dementia is the service responsive to people's needs? Because, of course, the one thing that we know about the progression of dementia is that people's needs will change. And if you started out with a service and the assessment at that stage doesn't change, then the service will not be responsive to your needs and will not be responding to what you need as the as the dementia progresses. And what we absolutely know, and I'm going to bring this out, and you're going to be hearing from Claire Jeffries later on today, you will see this in the flesh. Leadership is so important in terms of the way that services are provided. Are services well led? Do they have a culture which is open, inclusive, supportive, that actually makes sure that staff are trained, capable and confident in terms of being able to deliver the care that we want them to deliver? So we wrap all of that up into saying, is this a service I would be happy for my mum or anyone I love to receive? And as Gillian so poignantly reminded us at the beginning of her presentation, dementia happens to all of us, not other people. And thinking about this on the basis of, is this a service that I would be happy for somebody that I love to use, then that's really going to focus our minds on making sure that when we're registering and inspecting services, we're making sure that they're great services and that people who are delivering those services know what's expected too. But even more importantly, people who are using services and choosing to use services can rely upon the information that we're providing that says what's happening. So that's the kind of positive thing. But unfortunately, what I have to say in answering the question about whether services are meeting the needs of people who are living with dementia is that it is variable. The great thing about this graph here is that the big green bar demonstrates that the vast majority of services are good. And I think that that is something to celebrate and to be positive about. We also have a further 2% of services that are outstanding. And as I say, you're going to be hearing from an outstanding service provider later on today who's got outstanding twice, so she's really good. But we need to celebrate that and we need to learn from that, and I'm going to identify some of the key aspects of outstanding services in a second. But the problem with those figures is that it does also mean that 1 in 5 services do not meet that mum test, and not services that I would necessarily be happy for my mum or my dad or somebody I love to use. And the 2% of services that are inadequate, if you need a nightmare read, then read some of our reports of services that are inadequate, and you will see, and I'm going to highlight some examples later of what really we should be avoiding. What I also wanted to identify, though, was how the services rate when we look at them in terms of those 5 key questions. And the really great thing is that the vast majority of services, 92% of services, are rated as good for caring. And whilst that means that we're kind of seeing deterioration in other areas, I would really like to pay tribute to the staff who are working in adult social care, who in the most services are really going in there every day to try and provide services that are good and support people with dignity and respect. And this is, again, just to show that variability, because, of course, services, and Jeremy talked about this in his opening presentation, there's all sorts of different services that people living with dementia and their families are going to be relying upon. And what we can see here is that in community services and in domiciliary care, over 80% of services are rated as good, and a further 3 and 4% are rated as outstanding. But my real worry on this slide is that those services that are supporting people in the most vulnerable of circumstances in nursing homes, that is where we see the highest level of concern. And we've got 3% of those services rated as inadequate and 26% rated as requires improvement. And what is really worrying is that it is when people are at their highest level of need, and the points that Gillian was making about the fantastic progress we've made in extending life, but we know, and you know, so many people living with dementia will have many other conditions as well, and they will need really skilled support, and that's what they should be expecting to get when they're actually using services in nursing homes. And sadly, that is not always the case. So we've still got some work to do around this. And I think one of the really important things is understanding that whilst I, as a regulator, and all my team, and there are some of them in the audience as well, we are absolutely dedicated to making sure that we support people to have high quality, safe, effective, compassionate care. But we cannot do it by ourselves. And one of the things that we were involved in last year was working with people from across the sector, from across adult social care, commissioners who are commissioning services, people who are providing services, staff in those services, to listen to the voice of people using services, their carers and families, to create something called Quality Matters. And what Quality Matters is all about is to say it matters to all of us. Every single one of us has a duty and a responsibility to ensure that there is good quality care. And as part of that process, we talked to people and said, what was it that they wanted? And this is a wonderful graphic from Pen Mendonca from the workshop that we did with various experts by experience and co-production groups from the Social Care Institute for Excellence, from NICE as well, and from Think Local at Personal. And I can't think of a better way of describing what it is that people want than relationships, good support and care. It's about being human. It's about seamless services, which I'll come back to. We see some great care. absolutely fantastic care where people have really thought about how can they support people with dementia, to make sure the environment is appropriate, to make sure that people are supported to eat properly, to drink properly, for meals to be a pleasurable experience rather than a hassle. And I'm not going to read through the words. As you've already heard, you will have all of these slides. But these are some examples of, these are examples and quotes taken from reports that we've written of outstanding services. And this one I particularly like because it comes from the registered manager herself, talking about her passion, her leadership, her values, her vision for what her service should be like. And guess what? That's what the staff are like too. And if you've got that leadership, if you've got that vision and focus on what people are there to achieve, and making sure that care is relevant to people's lives, it truly is person-centred. And as many of the Alzheimer's Society ambassadors always say, if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. You cannot do a one-size-fits-all for services for people who are living with dementia. But as I say, some of it just plain isn't good enough. And these are quotes from some services that we've been in and we've rated as inadequate. It is shocking that in 2017-18, these are examples of care that we have seen over the last year. And, this is just not acceptable. And I worry, obviously, about kind of CQC highlighting yet again the things that are bad about adult social care when there was so much good, there were so many dedicated people doing a fantastic job. But we absolutely have to call this out because it's not acceptable and it cannot be allowed to continue. And one of the ways that we can make sure that it's not allowed to continue is by learning from the best, by making sure that we really, really think about what is it that Claire and others are doing that actually ensures that the service that they are providing is outstanding. And it's about having people at the centre of the service and supporting people to have a life, not just using a service. Just so important. That good leadership I've already talked about, the transparent, open culture that really embraces people who are using services, their staff, families and carers. And that is so important in services for people living with dementia. At the point that somebody enters a service, and particularly a nursing home, you are the people as families and carers who know that person best, who can help the staff to really understand and provide good care. And so actually having that transparent, open, inclusive culture is just so important. And last but not least, people who are providing outstanding services are not doing it for me. They're not doing it for my inspectors. They're not doing it for the regulator. They're doing it for the people who are using the service. And we can really tell when folk think that they are jumping over the various hoops and all of those kind of things just to get that tick in a box. And you're not going to get a tick in a box just because you're doing it for us, because this is what needs to be happening all the time. And what I wanted to just conclude with is saying it's not just about individual services. For all of you supporting people or living with dementia, you know that actually it's the entire system that really matters in terms of how you are supported and how services work with you to treat you well. And we are currently going through some work looking at local systems. How well do people over the age of 65 move through systems when we're supporting them to maintain their well-being in their normal place of residence, which could be in their home, but it could be a nursing home or a care home, what happens in a crisis and what happens in step down. And I think that there's a new mum test. The new mum test is this a place where I'd like my mum or dad to live? And because actually this doesn't happen. We wrote about this in our interim report, which we published in December. We were told about Mrs. Jones, not her real name, who lived at home independently with the support of her son and services from a domiciliary care agency. Mrs. Jones had dementia, but she was happy and safe. One Friday evening, she fell over and bumped her head and was taken to hospital by her son. After a night in hospital, she was ready to go home. But because the right staff weren't available in the hospital, she couldn't be discharged. And because she couldn't be discharged, by Monday, when the right people were available, her home care arrangements had been stopped. And so she couldn't go home. She stayed in hospital for over a month. Her condition deteriorated, and eventually she moved into a residential care home. She never saw her home again. That's just not the way it should be. And that is because people are not joining services up. And we have, again, I'm not going to go over everything, so I've got about 2 minutes left. But what I wanted just to highlight was our interim report identified that an awful lot of work has been done on supporting people to be discharged from hospital. And that's right and proper. Absolutely right and proper. I don't want my mum and dad in hospital for any longer than they need to be. It's dangerous. But if we just focus on getting people out of hospital, we don't think about how can we prevent them getting in hospital in the first place, and actually ensuring there are other ways that that situation could have been managed, which might not have needed that lady to have gone into hospital at all. We are seeing in the reviews great commitment at a leadership level, but it's not translating into practical reality on the ground. And yet again, we are seeing that social care is not being treated as a valued partner and engaged with around the table in the local partnerships, in sustainable and transformation partnerships and other ways. So we absolutely need to focus on not just developing capacity, but really thinking about how that capacity is focused on quality, has the right workforce supporting it, and is looking at some of the innovative practices that we know that exist. And last but not least, it is all about the people. Person-centred, coordinated care, high-quality care for everybody is what we want and what we should be trying to achieve. Thank you all very much.